Consciousness. All the players and all the games with cameos and calls from the most interesting people like you. We'll see and hear you right here on your talk radio superstation. This is The Point.
The Ray Gibson Show was filmed before a live Facebook audience.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Give the taxpayers more. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Trump says the coronavirus economic relief bill passed by the Congress late Monday doesn't provide enough relief to taxpayers.
I am asking Congress to amend this bill and increase the ridiculously low $600 to $2,000 or $4,000 for a couple.
He's also asking Congress to delete several items that he considers to be wasteful. House Speaker Pelosi says she's ready to bring an amended bill to the House floor for passage by unanimous consent. The timing of the potential standoff could lead to the rarely used presidential pocket veto.
Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution requires the president to sign or veto a bill within 10 days, Sundays excluded, or it becomes law without his signature. Now, that's unless you're up against an adjournment of the Congress, and that's where the pocket veto comes in. The president essentially puts the bill in his pocket and never returns it to the Capitol with a veto, and he never signs it, and the bill goes poof when the Congress adjourns. Now, the absolute latest Congress can adjourn was 11:59 a.m. on January 3rd. That's because at noon on that day, the new Congress begins. It would have to be on his desk by December 23rd to force the president to either sign it or veto it, and that is not going to happen.
Fox's Chad Pergram, the president has issued several presidential pardons and commuted the sentences of 5 other people. Among those pardoned is George Papadopoulos, a former Trump campaign advisor who'd been convicted of lying to federal agents as part of the Mueller investigation. The Justice Department has found a state-run care center in Iowa for people with intellectual disabilities has likely violated the constitutional rights of the residents by subjecting them to human experiments, some of which were deemed dangerous by federal investigators. Wall Street Tuesday, the Dow dropped nearly 201 points. The S&P 500 lost 7, but NASDAQ gained 65 to reach a new record close. America is listening to Fox News.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
As we usher in the holiday season, we want to express our gratitude and appreciation for the lessons that have allowed us to navigate an unprecedented year. We recognize the impact the pandemic has brought to the world and express our condolences to those who have suffered. We are focused on family and what matters most as a community. Our team at Security Title is proud of the work we do. May this holiday season bring your family renewed hope. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from Security Title.
One of the big pharmaceutical companies says its pending coronavirus vaccine will likely be effective against a new strain of the virus that's been reported in Great Britain.
AstraZeneca tells Reuters its vaccine candidate should work against the COVID mutation. The variant is said to be up to 70% more contagious and pose more of a danger to children than the original strain. An AstraZeneca spokesperson says that company's vaccine trains the immune system to recognize different parts of the protein, so it can be fought if it emerges later in a mutated form. The vaccine, developed with help from Oxford University, is like Moderna's product in that it can be stored at normal refrigerator temperatures. Reuters also reports India could approve this vaccine by next week. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
A federal judge has heard arguments that a federal program that shields certain illegal immigrants from deportation should be shut down.
9 states led by Texas argued the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program known as DACA isn't valid, claiming then-President Obama unlawfully created it in 2012. If the judge agrees, the ruling could have serious consequences for nearly 650,000 people, often referred to as dreamers. DACA protects them from deportation, allows them to work and obtain driver's licenses, and in some cases improves access to financial aid for education. President Trump sought to end DACA in 2017, but the Supreme Court in June blocked the effort, saying the administration's case was arbitrary, capricious, and procedurally flawed. The justices, however, did not rule on the legality of DACA itself. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
4 people were found dead in Meridian, Mississippi Tuesday after their employers told the sheriff's department they hadn't shown up for work. A suspect in the case died from what appears to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound following a police chase. 3 police officers have been killed and a 4th wounded in central France. No details yet. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Rolling sound, quiet, and action.
The Ray Gibson Show. Starring Senator Mana Silva Tyron as the news anchor.
I'm Mana Silva Tyron, and I'll have your local news every morning. Life moves pretty fast, so stay with us to stay informed right here on The Point.
Also starring Jerry Roberts as the Better Business Training Guru.
Get out there and do something good today. Like listen to us, Monday through Friday, 6 to 10 a.m., where we go extra for you.
Produced by the real Joe Cruz. And your warm and intelligent host, Ray Gibson.
It's the Gibson Stream of Consciousness. All the players and all the games with cameos and calls from the most interesting people like you. We'll see and hear you right here on your talk radio superstation. This is The Point.
The Ray Gibson Show was filmed before a live Facebook audience.
Celebrate the season with Cold Stone Creamery's Cookie Cane Lane Ice Cream Cake with red velvet cake, dark chocolate peppermint ice cream, and Oreos, wrapped in fudge ganache and candy cane bits. Order in person, by phone, or at ordercoldstone.com. Cold Stone Creamery, the ultimate ice cream experience.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 66 years. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, welcome back to Tall Tales. Here we are again for another exciting, elucidating, educational episode of Tall Tales. We got a full episode today and another one tomorrow, and Jose and I are going to have to take Friday off.
What's Friday?
What is it? It's a holiday. Oh, yeah, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, too, but that's not till Friday.
Yeah, Friday, yeah. Right. So, yeah, we're just going to keep on with the regular routine here right up until Friday, and then we'll enter a 94-hour hibernation with no Tall Tales. It's quite a Christmas present for us.
And no gatherings over 10 people.
That's true. Yeah, that would be like one millionth of our international radio listening audience that we deal with every day. Okay, let's go straight to Demi Cotney. So here we have a really sharp lady who did a special to USA Today. Of course, we don't do local editorials on our local newspaper called the Guam Pacific Daily News. So, yeah, this is a sharp lady. Her name is Joan Blades.
Is she really?
There you go.
I'm not the tall in the tall tales.
That's true.
There we go.
Yeah, that's very true, Jose. It's not something everybody can do. Yeah. Okay, here's what Joan said. I first became involved in politics in 1998 when my husband and I shared a one-sentence petition with less than 100 of our friends and family asking Congress to, quote, censure the president and move on to pressing issues facing the country. Love Bill Clinton or hate him, a large number of Americans agreed that impeachment was polarizing and not good for our country. Yeah. The petition went viral. Since that time, I've seen polarization escalate to a point where we seem incapable of effective governance. Many of us are appalled that addressing the Wuhan virus pandemic became polarized. Well, what do you expect there, Joan Sharp Blades? Important conversations are necessary about schools, business, faith community gatherings, mental health, and health. We need to be able to weigh the costs and the benefits of our actions. But in our recent state of distrust, anger, and fear, we appear to be incapable of productive engagement. She says, distrust, anger, and fear. I can't get past distrust and anger. Fear is not part of it. The data is clear that mask wearing protects us, especially the most vulnerable. Now here comes the commercial. The data is clear that mask wearing protects us, especially the most vulnerable. Media, leaders, and we ourselves have made it possible to live in parallel narratives where we don't share agreement about even fundamental facts. It has become normal to disrespect and even dismiss the humanity of people we don't agree with. Do you think that ever happens, Jose?
Yeah. Not here.
No. This is dangerous and at odds with our ideals. It's time for us to step up to the challenge of restoring a shared narrative. We can be more intentional about choosing our news media. We have to stop consuming media tuned to catch our attention through focusing on our fears, anxiety, and anger. I mean, like the mainstream media, the New York Times, WAPO, for instance. We can choose leaders who call us to work together and model respectful engagement across differences. Most important, we can choose to have caring relationships with people who hold differing views from us. The result of this election puts our stunningly different understanding of our country in stark relief. Millions of people are wondering, how can those voters see things so differently? It's time for us to answer that question. We must commit to curiosity and listening. I know exactly how the other side sees things so differently. It's not a matter of not understanding. I'm afraid I understand the other side too well. And I'm afraid that a lot of people on the other side don't have that depth of understanding. We can own our part of this downward spiral and commit to turning things around. It will at times be uncomfortable and confusing. It also will be enriching and fun. Treasured friendships and nuanced understanding are natural outcomes of this kind of investment. And it will take patience. It took time for us to become this dysfunctional, going all the way back to the time that they borked the Supreme Court nominee. That's, I think, about the time it all started. Restoring the capacity to collaborate is essential to producing long-term change. Long-term change? Change to what?
They never tell you that part.
No, and they never take into consideration that half the country doesn't want to embrace the changes that they're bringing on. don't want to embrace the changes at all. Our polarized swings from left to right and back again have the impact of a wrecking ball. What is created by one group is demolished by the other. Agreements that are embraced by a strong majority are immensely more robust. I do not ever want to have another election season like we just endured. I want our communities and government to do the hard work of looking for solutions to complex problems so that we have everyone's best ideas in the room and the agility to adapt and learn from our efforts. This requires shared vision and some trust. The good news is most people want a fair society. Most people? Let me tell you a little bit about anti-racism if you're thinking most people want a fair society. A robust economy, and a healthy environment. There are many theories about how we achieve this, but once we understand this core vision is shared, perhaps we can treat each other with more grace and forgiveness. We are experiencing a pandemic, climate disruption, and a reckoning with our history of racial oppression. There you go. And then now you're wondering why. You're wondering, climate change, racial oppression. Yep. Over on the left. So much for that. Let's go to the Post. And I can kind of sympathize with the Post. This is a time of the year where the wheels don't grind up much grist. The wheels spin around. There's a lot of grease on the threads of the gears, called the holidays, and there isn't a whole lot of grinding done. So here's the Post's offering for today. Reopening face-to-face classes on January 19, a welcome goal. The Guam Education Board's decision to give the green light for face-to-face classes to resume on January 19 is one of the best decisions it has made in recent memory. Well, the Post starts out by damning the Guam Education Board with faint praise.
With friends like them.
Yeah. For students and their families who are hoping to go back to in-person learning, this is good news to receive just before Christmas Day. You know, all of the kids will be glad if the school starts on January 19. Even the kids who like to play hooky. How do you play hooky when there's no school? It's time to restore a semblance of, guess what? Normalcy to our children, to our school children who need to work on their basic vocabularies, just like the people who write these stories. They need to be in the company of their peers, developing social skills as they get their grade level education. Restoring non-contact sports activities must occur in tandem with welcoming back students to physical classrooms. It's not healthy for students to remain cooped up, staring at a computer screen all day long. Who said anything about a computer screen? You mean staring at a phone all day long? That's what kids do. I suspect a lot of kids never sit down at a computer. Why should they when they've got an iPhone? It's not healthy for students to remain cooped up staring at a computer screen all day long and deprive them of fitness and sports activities in the company of other students and their coaches. Families of students with special needs are especially longing to return to traditional classroom learning and where students can get proper individualized education. Our public school students haven't set foot on physical campuses since March. The first half of the school year is over, and for the public schools, hundreds of students remain unaccounted for. The reasons for the lack of contact have included a lack of working or reliable phones in low-income households and lack of reliable transportation to pick up hard copy learning packets. Sometimes, and in certain home situations, the only way for students to get their education and a hot breakfast and lunch is to get on a bus to school. While there are students who do well with continuing to learn remotely, away from their teachers and classmates, many need the familiar surroundings of classrooms, friends, and classmates, especially if they don't have access to tall tales at 4 in the afternoon. The Education Board's decision is still subject to the governor's easing of restrictions to allow in-person classroom learning. Families of the students who want to return to physical classrooms can only hope the governor will trust schools, students, and their families to adhere to proper Wuhan virus safety precautions to give students a chance to live normal lives. Having said this, the government of Guam in general and the Guam Department of Education in particular must work more closely with educators to support their needs. Teaching online and making sure students get their paper lessons from home are already a challenge for teachers. Their tasks will triple with the added work associated with in-person learning, in addition to allowing other students to opt for continuation of remote learning via the distribution of paper lessons and, for many, through online classrooms. At some point, GDUA may have to phase out remote learning and paper lessons from home. Teachers will not be able to sustain teaching on 3 platforms under different class schedules, keeping track of all their students and keeping their sanity at the same time. Yeah, I can see that. Families need teachers to be in physical classrooms, but teachers cannot be expected to continue to perform triple their normal tasks for an extended period of time. It's just not sustainable. We also hope GovGuam will provide teachers with a system to get reimbursed for materials they need for safer classrooms. Some of Guam's teachers have dug into their pockets to buy air purifiers, hand sanitizers, and other items for an added measure to keep classrooms and students safe. These costs should not be out of their own pockets. We also hope every household that sends its students to physical campuses takes its responsibility seriously. This means if a child is sick, someone has to stay home and watch the child so the student doesn't go to school and expose everyone. Setting January 19th as the date to reopen is a good start. The tough part is to sort out the details. Schools and teachers need support to do this right and safely. Students and their households also will need to stay informed and maintain lines of communication with teachers and schools. There's a lot of moving parts to address, and there are only a few weeks remaining. It will take a collective community effort to make it work. Well, so much for the post for today. Okay, let's go from there to the card. And I've got some program notes here. And once again, program notes and the card are always posted on Jungle Watch, which is located at junglewatch.info, before the show begins, so you can tune in and have kind of like having the program when you go to the baseball game. And as I mention every day, you can comment on Jungle Watch on all of the really fascinating things you hear on Tall Tales. As an example, you could post a comment that said, boy, I really like the way Bob covered the subject of natural manure on Tuesday. Bob is a real subject matter expert there.
You're spreading it thick.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing you can post right there on Jungle Watch. And you can do it anonymously, so I won't be able to rat you out to our international radio listening audience of tailgaters. Okay, so yesterday we started a discussion of Sabina Barris as a animal rights activist and asked, why is PETA sabotaging her efforts? Now, we didn't get to finish that, but I think I can finish it today. Maybe not. Maybe I didn't bring that one with me. Yeah, I did. I do have it. Okay. Yeah, PETA versus Paris, it's called. And then we've got Troy on Candid News, an alternative news medium. Candid News revisited the Michael Ellert case and Ellert's release from prison. That's listed on the card as Troy versus Underwood, and you'll see why when I go through what Troy posted on Candid News. Then we've got courts haven't been friendly to causes of action like Tom Pinehoff's. You know, Tom Pinehoff has a case pending in the District Court of Guam dealing with the government's shutting him down. He's not the first one. There are several cases like that filed around the country, and I'm going to give you a brief summary. And unfortunately for Tom, it's not very good news, but it's what's going on. And then the next item on the card is called The Left versus Meritocracy. And I summarize that by saying Democrats show that politics trumps meritocracy. And then we've got the left versus nature. When it comes to sex, even some MDs are in the dark. They don't understand the difference between the two sexes. And then I've still got Fox drift to the left, and our local social justice warriors, and free speech, and English is a microaggression, still holdover items from the card from before. But let's start out with PETA versus Paris. And this is a story that ran on KUM. Nestor was the author. And it starts like this. The head of a national animal rights organization has come out strongly against a bid to officially recognize cockfighting as a cultural practice under Guam law. Ironically, the language is included in an amendment by Senator Pito Terlahi to an animal rights protection bill. And what many view as an obvious contradiction, Terlahi's provision to preserve cockfighting was tacked on without objection to Senator Sabina Paris' bill to stiffen civil and criminal liabilities for violence against animals, officially called the Protecting Animal Welfare and Safety Act, PAWS or PAWS. Paris's bill was sparked in part by public outrage over a brutal attack on a dog named Pugwa. A federal law that took effect a year ago clarified that cockfighting is now banned in all states and territories. Speaking today on the link, Animal Wellness Action President Wayne Parcell told KUAM News, "I think this is just posturing by the senator." Now, he doesn't mean Paris, he means Terlahi. Yeah. The reason that this was controversial is that the federal government was superseding the Guam legislature's decision-making on this issue. And I might say that we did a poll that shows Guamanians favor our opinion overwhelming. But Senator Terlahi argues that it should be recognized as part of the culture that's been practiced for hundreds of years since Spanish rule. Parcell says cockfighting has been around since the Roman Empire, but that doesn't make it right. Here's a quote. "It's a matter of animal cruelty. I mean, the practice of dogfighting is also invoked as a right by people. And the United States has looked at this issue. There is state authority to ban it, there's territorial authority to ban it, and there's federal authority to ban it. Every single court case that has been decided on this issue has gone in favor of the government's ability, as you were the government's authority, to stop cockfighting, Pascal explained. But despite the Terlahi Amendment, which Pascal calls a sideshow, he still hopes Paris bill becomes law. Our poll showed that 3/4 of Guamanians with strong feelings against cockfighting, 95% of Guamanians wanted to strengthen the protection against cruelty on the island, and 95%, he pointed out, this is a consensus opinion, and I hope the law passes very soon and that the governor signs it because it's long overdue on Guam. So what we have, and I got a little bit of a start on this yesterday, Sabina Paris, I'll come back after a short break here and talk about Sabina Paris.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Chili's has a dinner deal you can't miss. Enjoy a tasty appetizer, 2 bottomless Coca-Cola beverages, and 2 mouth-watering entrees, all for just $35. Treat yourself to entree options like our fall-off-the-bone baby back ribs, personal fajita with chicken, or the ultimate bacon burger. Chili's, 2 for $35. Available daily from 3 p.m. to closing for patio dining or takeout. Chili's is located on the 2nd floor of the Tuman Sands Plaza. Call 648-7377 to place your takeout order today. With Chili's, you can still savor the moment at home.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, so Senator Paris put together this extremely long, comprehensive anti-cruelty to animals bill. As I pointed out before, she even criminalizes bestiality. For those who aren't familiar with the term, bestiality means humans having sexual relations with animals. Yeah, that's what it means. And as I said yesterday...
Non-consensual.
Yeah, non-consensual. And as I said yesterday, I was a little surprised when her bill came along and there was no pushback from the sexual anarchy community here on the island. Yeah, so be it. But it is well done, and I like it. I don't like to see people being mean to animals, no matter what the animal is. I'll have to admit, if a mosquito lands on my arm, I'm going to swat the mosquito. Yeah, there he goes. But, like we had the other day, somebody shot a dog with a powerful air rifle. And we had an angry Tom Poole call in and tell us about that. And I'm glad he did. And I side with him. And I wouldn't even want to see somebody shoot at a dog, a stray dog, with a BB gun. I got a BB gun myself, but I'm not shooting stray dogs with it. The cruelest thing that I do is maybe shoot at empty glass bottles. But
you'll shoot your eye out, kid.
It's Christmas.
So, I think Sabina Paris is to be applauded for her bill. Then along comes Pedo Terlahi, Mr. Cultural Preservationist, I move to amend this bill to recognize cockfighting as a cultural cultural article. You know, we've been doing this ever since, and who is the federal government to come along and the whole rap, the whole shtick, as it were. And I'd like someone to explain to me, you know, the kind of the philosophical underpinnings of some of these things. Now, some people say, well, you know, we kill chickens and eat them. What's the difference? We kill cows and eat them. We kill pigs and eat them. Isn't this the same thing? Well, no, it's not the same thing, because there has to be a certain humane approach to slaughtering animals for food. And if there isn't, there is pushback on that. But chickens at cockfights, notwithstanding the title of today's program, you know, chickens at cockfights, roosters at cockfights are not slaughtered for somebody's Sunday dinner. You know, what we're doing is we're enjoying ourselves by watching two animals suffering. And we've kind of been acculturated to the idea that we don't like to see animals suffer for any reason. So if it's not a good thing for animals to suffer, if being cruel to animals is not a good thing, which is what Senator Sabina Paris thinks, then why is it okay as far as chickens are concerned, as far as roosters? It's a gadzu, iman gadzu. Why is it okay then? And the answer is, I think, just exactly what Wayne Pacell said. It's a sideshow. It was an opportunity for Pito Terlahi to stand up, Chahunai, e gadzu, Zani, e manmumu, e mangadzu, sa tomorudzu. You know, it's a great way to get out there and play to the nickel seats, the peanut gallery, etc., accomplishing nothing, but as I characterized it yesterday, accomplishing nothing but throwing a monkey wrench in Senator Paris's bill, a large enough monkey wrench that he got some off-island feedback from it. So we're not doing ourselves any favors by continuing. I was accused, or not accused, but I was presented a present the other day, which was a switch that I could use with respect to the Kelly Clark matter to continue to beat a dead horse. And but here we've got Pito Terlahi, who continues. He's not beating a dead horse. He's beating a dead chicken. And he's doing it with Sabina Paris's stick. So I think we should just put this behind us. And if you really were a cocker, it was great while it lasted, but now it's over. And let's move on to something else. Then next on the card here, I've got Troy versus Underwood. This came from Troy's website, Candid News. Sexual predator released from prison. Convicted sex predator Dr. Michael Ellert was released from prison this morning. Department of Corrections Deputy Director Bob Camacho confirmed. It was full-time release, Camacho said. He served his sentence. You know, people are really quick when someone is convicted of a crime and goes to prison and then is released from prison. They're very quick to say, well, he's paid his debt to society. Wrong. You haven't paid your debt to anything. You know, you did something wrong, you were caught, you were punished. You haven't paid your debt to anyone or anything. Back to the story here. A Superior Court jury found Ellert guilty of multiple counts of felony criminal sexual conduct in 2017. He began his sentence on June 24, 2019. Ellert was a politically powerful professor within the University of Guam's College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, where he taught psychology. He was notorious for throwing off-campus parties where several students accused him of imbibing them with alcohol. I don't know how you imbibe somebody with alcohol.
Isn't that like embalming?
Perhaps plying them with alcohol?
Supplying
them with alcohol? Imbibing them with alcohol, trying to seduce them, and even running around naked. In 2014, at least 3 students tried to file complaints with UOG officials that Ellert sexually assaulted them at these parties. UOG officials did nothing to address the women's complaints and eventually recommended the students seek help through the university's psychology department, which Ellert chaired at this time. Then UOG President Robert Underwood dismissed the claims that the university and its powerful faculty union were covering up the scandal. When another UOG professor, Dr. Ron McNinch, forced UOG to break its silence on it. Who is Ron McNinch? That name sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Oh, he calls Tall Tales from time.
Yeah,
that's
right.
the guy. Yeah, Ron McNinch. Yeah, the Georgia Peach. Yeah. McNinch began a crusade to defend the student victims. He was eventually chastised by the university management and faculty senate for speaking up against university actions. Both the faculty senate and Mr. Underwood attempted to censure and discipline McNinch for leading a public effort to have Ellert fired from the university. Between the first complaints in 2014 and his conviction in 2017, UOG not only kept Ellert on its payroll, but continued to allow him to teach and have access to students for the majority of that period. Very interesting. I remember when this came down and the accusations were out there and the prosecution had begun, but Ellert was still on the faculty for like another year until he was convicted finally. And I comment on this sort of thing every time it happens in the government. And I see it as the government of Guam job protection program. If you want to make sure your job is protected, be prosecuted for a crime, because then you won't get fired. You know, well, we can't fire him now because his case is still pending in the courts. Wrong. If a person commits acts that are criminal, that person could be fired from his government job as soon as those criminal acts are discovered. The criminal case may take another 3 years, but the termination can come in fact, the termination has to come within 90 days of when the acts are discovered. So let's take the case of someone indicted for criminal sexual conduct. The day, if management didn't know anything about the misconduct of the employee, they get a copy of the indictment. The indictment lays out the grounds for the termination. So you can't come along and say you're fired because you were indicted. But you can say you're fired because paragraph 1 of the indictment, paragraph 2, etc. Those would be the facts underlying the termination. We had a case with Ovita Nauta, who was working for the police department. She stole from the police department like $17,000. She then presented a check to try to pay it back. The check bounced, and they didn't fire her. They started the criminal prosecution, but they didn't fire her. And she could have been fired just like that. Later on, she transfers to the Department of Corrections. While she's at the Department of Corrections, about 2 years later, she finally pleads guilty to the charges, whereupon she could have been fired again. Does Tony LaMorena fire her? No, she's a good employee. That's just what you want in the police department and the Department of Corrections. People that steal government money. No! Then we had the case of, what was his name? Dennis, I can't remember his last name. The police officer, midnight, drunk, driving an official vehicle, smashes into somebody, does about $12,000 worth of damage, right? He is arrested at that time. The criminal prosecution begins. As far as we know, he wasn't fired. Very recently, he pled. He was sentenced to 6 days in jail. And as far as we know, he's still on the police force. Now, the only thing that could have happened there was during the 6 days, the chief of police could have transferred him to the Department of Corrections so he could have gotten paid during the time he was in the pokey. This Ellert case appears to be another one of the same thing. In the case of the guy that killed the other, or was charged with killing another police officer, Torrey. Torrey resigned during the pendency of the criminal case. He was found not guilty at the end of his criminal case. Good for him. So I suspect people are saying, well, he was found not guilty. No, they got to give him his job back. Wrong. It just doesn't work that way. The misconduct that can cause your termination, even if it's the same misconduct that charges you with a crime, being not found guilty of the crime doesn't mean you're exonerated from the civil charges. If any government director ever brings those charges. So this is a real fallacy, a real flaw with our government. And you have to ask what this does to the morale of the employees who are trying to be upstanding citizens and obey the rules and do the right thing when they see other people do things like this and get away with it. It's not a good situation. So I'm glad. And you didn't see the mainstream media touch this with somebody else's 10-foot ball. Good job, Troy. Way to go. All right. Next on the card here, I've got the left. Oh, already, huh? Okay, let's take a short break here.
Buying a house, apartment, or condo? Selling your home or property? Or maybe you're renting a house, apartment, or condo on Guam. Whatever your real estate needs are, you can count on the professionals at Horizon Properties to take care of you. Call Horizon Properties at 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonproperties.com or follow them on Facebook at Horizon Properties Guam. Maria Miller and the professionals at Horizon Properties. All you need to know in real estate.
Hafa Day. I'm Chelsea Tinkson Nicholas, and I'm the co-chair for this year's G is for Giving, as well as a proud alumna of the University of Guam. G is for Giving is an annual campaign that kicks off on the Tuesday following Thanksgiving and runs through December 31st. G is for Giving's mission supports scholarships, programs, and research at the University of Guam. As an alumna, I'm thankful for my many experiences at the University of Guam, and I want to support the development of our island future leaders. I encourage my fellow Tritons to give back to the school that helped shape us. I'd also like to encourage our island familia to help support these students who will shape the island for years to come. You can donate online by visiting give.uog.edu. And for more information, call the UOG Endowment Foundation at 735-2957.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and Mezcla Dos are open for takeout and delivery services. More details, call the Hagåtña location at 479-2652 or Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon at 646-6295. Get your Mezcla fix at the comfort of your home.
Okay, so here we are again, huh? Back on the air. I'm just going to take a minute here before I go on to the next item on the card to just glance through Facebook a little bit. We start out with Walter Gray, who will tell you that things are never black and white. They're just varying shades of
gray.
Gray, yeah. We've got Christian Dixon and Andrew Camacho. The members of Congress passed an omnibus bill that included $10 million for gender services in Pakistan. Now, that'll really help us during the pandemic. Well, look at it on the bright side, Andrew. They're probably more woke than we are in Pakistan. That bill has been nothing but criticized. It's a huge pork barrel bill, camouflaged as pandemic relief. That's for sure. Henry Manglotnia is here. Merry Christmas, Henry. And I've got Rico Blancafleur. And Rico talks about the Red Queen lifted a little bit more of restrictions. 15 people gathering indoor during a return to 25% folks in a restaurant, right?
Yeah, that must have just happened right before we went on the air.
Yeah, just when I went in to talk with Donna, the news had just broken. Rico Blank, and you know, it's such good news. I'm so happy about that. And I'm so happy that government of Guam employees got paid today instead of having to wait until a regular payday.
Right.
Yeah. You know, but of course, you know why Lou did that. It was the least you could do. Yeah. Yeah. Rico Blancafleur talks in terms of the loosening of the restrictions as more crumbs, the Stockholm-type gratitude, Stockholm syndrome. And Walter Gray is having a gray out with the app. He says the app seems out of sync with the show. Had to switch back to Facebook Live. Well, I have turned on the app during the Ray Gibson show, and the voices are not in line with one another. In other words, you got to listen to the radio or you got to listen to the app. You can't listen to both at the same time. And it seems that none of these things really link up very well. Like we have a screen up here that's real time. And then I've got a screen on my laptop that's delayed. And then the screen on my iPad is a little bit behind that. So there's a little bit of slack in these systems here, Walter. So I think you kind of have to make an election either on the app or on Facebook. I am going to urge you to stay with Facebook because you can make comments on Facebook.
I think he just misses your face.
Well, I can't say I blame him for that, you know. Yeah. So that's Walter's comment. And then Rico says she should just declare P-Corps 2 already. What's up with the tidbits at a time? Well, of course, there's the Bob and Ray resolution that's ready to go. And if that resolution had been introduced and were at least floating around the legislature, it might have given her some incentive to loosen up a little bit more. I've got Andrew saying several pundits predicted the lifting of restrictions if Democrats won the presidential election. All of a sudden, the Wuhan virus would seem to dissipate. Wouldn't that be amazing? During the time of Donald Trump, the Wuhan virus was a horrible threat. But when Joe Biden comes into office, pay no attention to that pandemic over there. There's nothing to see here. Randy Landis says those crumbs are stale. Picking it up and going a little farther with it. John Michael Beneventi, anyone see that Trump wants to throw out $2,000 for a stimulus package, or he vetoes the bill? Negative Nancy agreed with him. Now the Dems are claiming victory after Negative Nancy said he'd stop everything until President-elect Biden became President-elect Biden became president-elect. Well, you know, Trump has said, I want you guys to do a new bill. I want to give more money to the people and less money to the pork. But he's really stuck in an extremely hard place because the stimulus bill was melded with the pork bill, which, among other things, extends the debt ceiling, kicks that can down the road a little bit. So if Trump vetoed the bill that's lying before him today, the government shuts down. And I don't think that Trump wants that to happen. So they maneuvered it around and kind of put him in a trap that is very difficult for him to get out. So I don't think he'll amend. I don't think that he'll veto. I don't think the Congress will amend. I think that Congress will always enact as much pork barrel legislation as they think they can get away with, regardless of what the real situation is. Let's see, I've got Cynthia Mesa listening to President Biden. He says war against coronavirus is not behind us, but the worst is yet to come. I think he is the worst.
Who? President who?
Yeah. Well, he isn't even president-elect yet, right, Jose?
That's right. You sir, are still president-elect.
You haven't called it yet, have you?
No, sir.
All right. Okay, so much for the comments on Facebook here. I'm starting out here with the left versus nature, and I'll have to carry this over after the big halftime show. This is something that came from, I got it from an email from somebody, so I can't from the American Thinker, a good conservative news source. World-renowned medical journal pushes to remove sex from birth certificates. Yeah. You know, your birth certificate will have the name that your parents give you. It will have the sex. It'll have the date and time that you were born. Other facts. It'll say M or F. Yeah.
Didn't know it was an option.
And this is what they say. Sex designations on birth certificates offer no clinical utility, reads a new article from the New England Medical Journal. The New England Medical Journal is the major leagues of medical publications. Although it's seemingly good news that there's a Wuhan virus vaccine available, not everyone is embracing it. After all, they've seen the medical establishment from Fauci down make one mistake after another during this difficult year. Worse, many in the medical establishment are proving to be insane, as only leftists can be. The latest example is the once prestigious and reliable New England Medical Journal, which published an article declaring biological sex irrelevant. In the latest issue of the journal, 2 doctors and a lawyer have written that it's time to do away with putting a newborn baby's biological sex, as demonstrated by its external genitalia, on birth certificates. The article is behind a paywall, but here's a summary. Sex designations on birth certificates offer no clinical utility. They're of no use to a doctor at all. So if a doctor is supposed to circumcise a child, it wouldn't matter. It just wouldn't matter, right? No utility. And they can be harmful for intersex and transgender people. Yeah.
I wish I had Twilight Zone music.
Honestly. Moving such designation below the line of demarcation wouldn't compromise the birth certificate's public health function, but could avoid harm. First, let's meet the authors. There's Vadim Stalyer, is a clinical assistant professor of medicine at Brown University. He's a hospitalist, which means he's a regular internal medicine doctor who doesn't have an office practice but works only in a hospital. Jessica A. Clark is a law professor at Vanderbilt Law School. I'm going to go back to that Shakespeare article there. First thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. All right, let's break for the halftime show, and we'll come back to the New England Journal of Medicine.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The president says there's not enough relief in the stimulus bill. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Trump calling the bill passed late Monday night by Congress a disgrace because he says there's too much waste and not enough relief in it.
Congress found plenty of money for foreign countries, lobbyists, and special interests while sending the bare minimum to the American people who need it.
The president calling on Congress to amend the bill to hike the planned $600 payments to taxpayers to $2,000 for individuals and to rid the bill of what he called wasteful items. But would the president veto the bill?
He hopes not to be in that position. As he says so often, we'll see what happens. What he's done tonight is done a call to action for Congress to do better, to strip out the things that are not addressing these core issues and to address the core issues in a more robust way. And we hope they'll do that.
White House Deputy Press Secretary Brian Morgenstern, both House Speaker Pelosi and Senate Democrat leader Schumer signaling they are on board with the higher payments. The U.S. has passed 18 million coronavirus cases since the outbreak began. Dr. Anthony Fauci, head of the Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, receiving the Moderna coronavirus vaccine on Tuesday, but says the fact there are now inoculations available won't immediately lessen the risk to the general public.
A vaccine right now at the stage that we're at should not change anything when it comes to the public health measures that we're implementing.
That means continued mask wearing, physical distancing, and avoiding large gatherings. More ominous signs from Hawaii's Kilauea volcano. Lava has been rising in the volcano's crater at the rate of more than 3 feet an hour. An eruption in 2018 destroyed 700 homes on Hawaii's Big Island. In central France, a domestic violence call has left 3 French police officers shot to death and a 4th wounded. They were called to a residence in Saint-Just, Puy-de-Dôme, where the suspect began shooting at them. America is listening to Fox News.
As we usher in the holiday season, we want to express our gratitude and appreciation for the lessons that have allowed us to navigate an unprecedented year. We recognize the impact the pandemic has brought to the world and express our condolences to those who have suffered. We are focused on family and what matters most as a community. Our team at Security Title is proud of the work we do. May this holiday season bring your family renewed hope. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from Security Title.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
It is apparently safe to go back to the salad bar again.
This past fall, at least 40 people got sick with E. coli. Half of them had to be hospitalized after eating leafy greens. It was a multi-state outbreak the feds say appears to be over, but the preliminary investigation by the Food and Drug Administration found the E. coli in this case was genetically related to a strain linked to the outbreak triggered by romaine lettuce last year. The major cause of that outbreak was farms located downslope from cattle grazing areas. Waste from some of the cows was found to be contaminated with E. coli. The feds say they're continuing their investigation into the leafy greens. Jill Nato, Fox News.
Democrat Iowa Congresswoman Rita Hart is asking the House of Representatives to investigate and overturn her congressional race that the state says she lost by 6 votes. She argues 22 of the ballots were wrongly excluded and others weren't examined during the recount. She says that would have netted her 15 additional votes and defeated Republican Marionette Miller Meeks had those ballots been counted. She's asking the Democrat-led House to count the votes and conduct a uniform recount throughout the district's 24 counties. 2 Muslim men say they were kicked off an Alaska Airlines flight for sending text messages in Arabic.
The 2 were on a flight from Seattle to San Francisco when someone noticed one of the men texting before takeoff and reported him to a flight attendant. According to the Council on American Islamic Relations, police translated the text, determining there was no threat, but they were kicked off the flight anyway. CARE now suing Alaska Airlines, claiming the 2 were humiliated because of their religion. The airline has apologized and has launched an internal investigation. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hoffaday. I'm Chelsea Nicholas, and I'm the co-chair for this year's G is for Giving, as well as a proud alumna of the University of Guam. G is for Giving is an annual campaign that kicks off on the Tuesday following Thanksgiving and runs through the end of the year. Known as Giving Tuesday, it is an international day of giving, and this year's theme is Weaving Community. On Guam, we know a little something about weaving community, as we're all intertwined and interconnected in the spirit of Inaf Malik. When one of us thrives, the island thrives. This is why I support G is for Giving's mission to support scholarships, programs, and research. As an alumna, I know how difficult it is to balance going to school and worrying about how you're going to pay for school. In these uncertain times, students are even more at risk because of economic hardship beyond their control. G is for Giving aims to bridge that gap and take away at least some of the burden. For more information on how you can give, visit give.uog.edu or call the UOG Endowment Foundation at 735-2957. Have a happy and safe holiday.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
Another great halftime show here on Tall Tales. But now we are back in New England at the New England Medical Journal. And New England Medical Journal published an article by 2 doctors and a lawyer holding that sex designations on birth certificates offer no clinical utility. And I'm going back to this same article I was reading before the halftime show. In the latest issue of the New England Medical Journal, 2 doctors and a lawyer have written that it's time to do away with putting a newborn baby's biological sex as demonstrated by its external genitalia. Now, here's a grammatical error, right? As demonstrated by its external genitalia. I suspect if these folks that wrote the article were proofreading this, they would say their genitalia, right? Yeah. One baby, they, yeah. Sex designations on birth certificates offer no clinical utility, and they can be harmful for intersex and transgender people. Moving such designations below the line of demarcation wouldn't compromise the birth certificate's public health function, but could avoid harm. And the authors are Vadim Stahler, a clinical assistant professor at medicine at Brown University and a hospitalist. Jessica Clark is a law professor at Vanderbilt Law School. She studies constitutional and statutory guarantees of non-discrimination based on traits such as sex, race, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, disability, and fantasy. As you can see, these people are not fringe crackpots. No, they're not. They're mainstream crackpots. They are associated with reputable institutions. They're getting published in the New England Medical Journal, one of the most prestigious medical magazines in the world. They can be said to represent the mainstream of American medical thinking and its intersection with legal principles. Frightening, isn't it? And from that pinnacle of professionalism, they're telling us that whether a child is a boy or a girl is irrelevant for purposes of a birth certificate. And why do they say that? Well, because they're woke. Because, and here's the explanation from the author, because a vanishingly small percentage of the population has a mental illness that leads those sad people to believe they're in the wrong body. It does sound like the Twilight Zone, doesn't it, Jose?
It's absolutely incredible.
I woke up this morning and I looked around and I didn't recognize my body. When I went to sleep, I was 5'4" tall, and I weighed about 300 pounds. I wake up and I'm a foot taller and 100 pounds lighter. Someone must have swapped out bodies on me.
That's a tall tale.
Yeah. And why do they say that? Because a vanishingly small percentage of the population has a mental illness that leads those sad people to believe they're in the wrong body. Keep in mind that there is no study at all supporting the magical transgender theory. It's a purely psychological problem, often associated with severe childhood trauma, especially in the form of absentee fathers and insane mothers. Accepting as true persons claim that is really a member of the opposite sex is precisely the same as accepting as true an emaciated anorexic's claim that she is morbidly obese and offering her diet pills and stomach stapling. Same thing. Reality is not a construct. We can quibble about our approaches to reality. As an example, I say the fabric is puce. You say it's eggplant. We're back to tomato and tomato, I guess, huh? But the real world exists. Gravity is a thing. And even if you tell yourself you're a bird, when you step off the room and flap your arms, you're not going anywhere but down. when a society abandons reality, and that's where we are living in a society that is very rapidly abandoning reality. When it pretends the genetic coding that dictates our body's sex is meaningless, that society is headed for a disastrous landing. Mentally ill men who think their women do not need to go to a gynecologist like Dr. Adachi because they do not have a uterus, ovaries, fallopian tubes, or any of the other organs associated with a female animal's prime function, which is to incubate babies. Oh, that's hate speech, right?
That's not what my birth certificate says.
Yeah. I mean, this basic thing that there are females, and females are on the earth to bear like kind for the propagation of the race. The really important thing to remember here is that people with cervixes ought to get that cervical cancer vaccine. Remember that, Jose? When CNN ran a story talking about a vaccine that holds off cervical cancer, and the recommendation was that anyone with a cervix ought to get that vaccination. And the unwoke media said, couldn't we just have said women? Yeah.
But that is interesting, because if you remove male, female from the birth certificate, are we not acknowledging cervix and sans cervix as well?
Well, I suppose, but, you know, what difference does it really make?
It's still real.
Yeah. So if a person has a cervix and he knows that he's really a man, then what do we go with? How could we argue with someone about what sex they are? They should know, right?
At least the cervix knows.
Yeah. Likewise, mentally ill women who think their men do not need to go to that same gynecologist because their reproductive organs can fall prey to all sorts of unpleasant diseases and conditions that are best treated by someone trained in the area, something like Dr. Adachi, for example. When we start pretending boys are girls and girls are boys, the pretend girls waste gynecologists' time, while the real girls pretending to be boys dangerously ignore their biological needs. You know, it used to be so simple. I used to understand anatomy to a fare thee well. You know, you just ask, what are boys made of? What are girls made of? What are little girls made of? Sugar and spice.
Everything nice.
And everything nice. And what are little boys made of? Dogs and snails and puppy dog tails.
Yep.
That's the way it used to be. But
that was the formula.
Yeah. Once doctors started playing around with these anti-science, anti-reality fantasies, these same doctors lose the trust of 95% or so of Americans who inhabit a fact-based world. Yeah, now I wouldn't go to these two doctors here, you know, for any reason. If they can't get this one right, what else are they going to screw up? And as far as the lawyer involved there, it reminds me of the old story about the criminal defendant who was sentenced to death didn't take much comfort from the fact that his lawyer didn't charge him much. Yeah. So that's where they are. Once doctors start playing with these anti-science, anti-reality fantasies, these same doctors lose the trust of 95% or so of Americans who inhabit a fact-based world in which human animals with penises are boys and human animals with vaginas are girls. What radical stuff is this? What sane person would trust a doctor of all people who can't tell the two apart? And that gets us back to those vaccines the college-educated, increasingly leftist medical establishment is insisting we must take. It seems that many are asking themselves when it comes to a vaccine that was rushed into production, why they should take medical advice from a doctor who is incapable of telling a boy from a girl, or a medical establishment that supports such madness. It's very true. You know, if you can't get the little ones right, people are not going to trust you with the big ones. Good article. All right. Next item on the card. Still picking on the left here. This is the left versus meritocracy. Now, let me explain that term. Meritocracy means, krasi means, it's a Greek suffix meaning government by. Democracy, demo means people, krasi, government, government by the people. Meritocracy means government by the meritorious. So in other words, when you're filling a position in the government, you look for the most qualified person who could do the job. As an example, if you were hiring a doctor, a medical doctor, you'd probably want one who knew the difference between boys and girls. So long as he hadn't been published in the New England Journal of Medicine.
Or an accountant at the port.
Or an accountant at the port. Okay. Yeah, if you were an accountant at the port and you hired him as a doctor and you fired him, he'd get his job back and you'd have to pay him back pay.
And back pay.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so just when you thought they couldn't be more divisive, if you just arrived on the planet, you'd swear the Democrat Party was trying to start a civil war. It wouldn't be possible to divide people in more ways than Democrats do, all for their own benefit. The people without jobs are taught to resent those lucky enough to have them. People without savings are trained to be angry at those with. Everyone is conditioned to hate people with more than them, more of anything. Further down the left-wing hate spiral, Democrats have indoctrinated people to distrust and dislike people of other races. Race has always been an effective weapon for Democrats. The party of slavery became the party of Ku Klux Klan, became the party of segregation, became the party of Jim Crow, became the party of no tolerance. No. In the name of tolerance, Democrats have brought about segregated graduation, school dances, and college housing. Kind of ties into what I was talking about yesterday about whether Brown versus Board of Education was a mistake. Brown versus Board of Education said segregation and nothing more is on its face a violation of equal protection. But now the Democrats are saying, no, you got it wrong. We have to segregate the races. We have to be anti-racist, and we can't do that unless we segregate the races. Okay, so in the name of tolerance, Democrats have brought about segregated graduation, school dances, and college housing. The circle is complete. It'd be easier and faster to list things Democrats haven't made into a race issue than it would be to list what they haven't. The latter consists mostly of the failed policies they've implemented in the cities they've controlled for generations, and they're only on the list because the complete economic collapse of those places can only be blamed on their actions. If you wanted to condemn a race of people to a life of poverty and crime, you'd be hard-pressed to find a way to do it more effectively than Democrats have. Now, Joe Biden is risking throwing his shoulder out of its socket by patting himself on the back over picking a diverse cabinet. Lost in all this self-congratulatory garbage over picking people based on their race, gender, or sexual orientation is whether or not they're qualified to do the job. And I remember talking the other day about Joe Biden's choice of vice president and how the left media was just, beside itself with joy. What a wonderful thing. All of the accomplishments of Kamala Harris. And I said, yeah, let's sit down and measure the accomplishments of Kamala Harris. She was close to a man twice her age who got her a couple of really good jobs in the California government and stumped for her when she ran for Attorney General of California. But that wasn't the end of it. When Joe Biden said he was going to pick a vice president, first of all, he said, I'm going to pick someone who is extremely smart, understands the government, is honest, straightforward, and will make an outstanding vice president. And should I pass away, will make an outstanding president. That's exactly what he said.
Nope.
No! He never said that. He said, I'm going to pick a woman. Yeah. And then as he got closer to the time he had to make the choice, some African-American politician said, you better pick a black woman if you want to be president. So relying on qualifications, he picked a black woman who didn't even make it through the Democrat Party. She finished dead last in the Democrat Party. Merit, right? You picked her on merit. She was a black woman. So here we are. Now Joe Biden is throwing his shoulder out of its socket by patting himself on the back over picking a, quote, diverse cabinet. Lost in all of this self-congratulatory garbage over people based on race, gender, or sexual orientation is whether or not they're qualified to do the job. That Pete Buttigieg proposed to his husband in an airport. I don't know if you knew that, but Pete Buttigieg said that airports are romantic places because that's where he proposed to his husband.
Very romantic.
Yeah. Pete Buttigieg proposed to his husband in an airport is even less impressive than the fact that he claims riding the train in college qualifies him to be qualifies him to lead the Department of Transportation. So he's going to be the Secretary of Transportation. Well, Pete proposed to his husband in the airport. And appointing the first African-American woman to head whatever department is less important than answering the question, can she do the job? This game of intersectional bingo Biden is playing has gone too far for House Majority Whip James Clyburn. Yeah, senator from Carolina, who's largely responsible for Biden winning the nomination by endorsing him just before the North Carolina primary. Senator Jim Clyburn, who is, by the way, an African-American.
Yeah, very influential there.
Yeah. Clyburn said, quote, it's also important to consider a person's experience during the vetting process. What a crazy idea. Clyburn must not have been paying attention to what his party has been doing for the past 20 years as Democrats made their living separating people by race and demanding they be treated differently. Actually, as I said earlier, they've been doing that since their forming, way back before the Civil War. And just when you thought they couldn't go any lower than demanding people be treated differently on the base of race, curiously, in the name of anti-racism, and I discussed yesterday, laid out what anti-racism means. It doesn't mean what you think it means. In the name of anti-racism, they found a new way to impose even more racism, the Wuhan virus vaccine. The New York Times, in accidentally exposing the underbelly of the left, quoted three, quote, experts on healthcare and ethics calling for people to be given priority access to or excluded from getting the vaccine because of race. Mark Lipsitch from Harvard, where else, doesn't think teachers should be given priority. They have middle-class salaries and they're often white. Elise Gould from the Liberal Economic Policy Institute disagrees, not because the concept of picking and choosing which professions are essential based on skin color is disgusting, but because the students of many teachers are black and brown, and therefore vaccinating teachers will help black and brown people be able to return to work faster. Worst of all was Harold Schmidt, ethicist, in quotes, ethicist, at the University of Pennsylvania, who said essential workers who he racistly views as minorities should get the vaccine before people over the elderly, even though it's the elderly who are by far the most likely to die because older populations are whiter. Society is structured in a way that enables them to live longer. No harm, no foul.
Remember those death panels they were talking about on Obamacare?
Yeah.
Here you go.
Here we are. Instead of giving additional health benefits to those who already had more of them, we can start to level the playing field a bit. Let more people die because the group they belong to tends to be white is a couple of noun swaps away from Hitlerian. Only likely, this guy has tenure. These people are sick, yet they're recommending making decisions of life and death based on race. And those recommendations are being implemented by the government. It's real and it's sick. The left has denounced eugenics, but they still practice it. They just do it more politely and subtly than before. They've also denounced racism and segregation, yet they still practice it. And they're doing it out in the open, proudly. If you wanted Americans to hate each other, I'm not really sure how you could go about it more efficiently. Crouching it under banners of, quote, equity and tolerance is Goebbels-esque. The Democrat Party, the party of racism and segregation, has never changed its objective. They've only changed their tactics. So we're coming up here to the seventh inning stretch, and sure enough, I've got another Joe on the line.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations, check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu.
Yeah, so here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago. And just finish this article here about how we should decide who gets the vaccine. We put aside medical judgments like who needs it the most, how we could prolong life, any kind of a medical judgment, and base it just on race. And then, of course, yesterday I read the article from the scholar who said that what we really need to do is let every black person have 2 votes instead of 1. Welcome to the Democrat Party. Okay, I've got another Joe waiting impatiently in the green room for his very first ride on the merry-go-round today. Good afternoon, another Joe.
Yeah, Bob, 2 more days till Christmas. Another day to say Merry Christmas to you, Bob. So
I'm going to wait until tomorrow before I start sharing my bah humbugs, but go on, another Joe.
What is it, the 25 days of Christmas? How many days of Christmas? So here it is, Bob. There's several issues I want to bring up regarding vaccines. So first, it should most definitely be, the majority of it should be voluntary. And I say that because the people who are pushing the vaccine themselves, if they're going to benefit from it, if they're leaders, or if they somehow are involved in the finances, and they're going to get a profit from it, if they really believe in this product, you would think that they should be required to use it. That's the first thing, but mostly voluntary. Everyone else in the population. And as far as who should be allowed to get the vaccine, let's say saying that everyone in question wants to be given the vaccine, it should be based on the most productive, or the most, saving the most people as much as possible, most Americans, if you want to focus on our nation in particular, American society. So whatever that translates to, that should be the equation. That should be the calculus, and that will possibly be the people in the front lines in the most contact of others, wherever the virus is most likely to be prevalent, or people in touch with it, and therefore get infected. The people in those areas, they should be one of those prioritized as being the first to be vaccinated. Then, like I said, they're probably going to be the most vulnerable, the oldest, the youngest, the most weak immune systems. Then after that, right, it would be based, because the objective is to minimize the spread of the infection. Then after that would be those who can pay, who are able to pay, who are willing to pay, because after all, this is big pharmacy, and this is the free market. So to those who can pay, go the product. And then, I'm not sure, it might sound a little bit bad, but usually what it means is the productive people in their prime of their life. People who are working in the workforce, and they can afford to give up some of their disposable income, if there is such a thing at this time with a lockdown. Then that would, in a way, help stimulate the economy, the free market, and then business as usual in the American tradition. Again, is attempt to getting back to as much as normality. That's the word to use, right, Bob?
Absolutely. Good show, real Joe. Another Joe.
As much as possible back to normality as we know in American society. And what we can recall of it. I mean, it's been about a year, going on a year now, a little bit more than a year. And so hopefully we haven't forgotten what it means to have an American way of life, American lifestyle. And then everything else should fall into line. I like to bring up. I like to express one of my childhood mottos: truth, justice, and the American way. Of course, we know where that comes from, right? About
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it's Superman.
Yeah, truth, justice, and the American way, as made known to us every day on Tall Tales.
There you go, Kabab. So anyway, I think that is the way to go. And but here's another concern, Kabab, is I want to know. People they talk in terms of people having pedigrees. They talk about pets having, I guess I don't know, pedigrees, both pets and people. Anyway, regarding the tissue culture, whatever they use to create the vaccine, presuming that it came from a human being, the tissues that they grew in a laboratory, I'd like to know the origin of that tissue, the source of it. However many years it went, you have to go back. That tissue came from a human being. I'd like to know the origin of it. Did it come from unborn fetus? Was that fetus? Or were they born and they got that tissue while the mother was pregnant with the child? I don't know. I'm just hoping it wasn't. It's they didn't use.
Perhaps came from the Planned Parenthood wholesale store.
I laugh, except that
it's true.
Black Friday skull.
Yeah, it's tragic to think about. It kind of makes me sad. But I seriously think I would want to know, and I think people deserve to know where the origin of that the tissue culture came from when it first started. Anyway, Kabab, thanks for your time, and I'll just keep listening. And you can see Bob anytime you want, and I'll say Merry Christmas from now until Merry Christmas, and maybe even after. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You're a hard man, another Joe. Yeah, so I read that this vaccine is going to be furnished to everyone at no cost to the vaccinee, right? The government's going to pay for it all.
That doesn't mean no cost.
At no cost to the vaccinee, if there is such a word, yeah, right? So what we're seeing here then is exactly how socialism works, because economic endeavor always deals with one thing: scarcity. And when any product, any good is scarce, then the setting of the price for that product is essential. So if I wanted you to mow my lawn, and you wanted $10 to mow my lawn, and I had to work for 3 days to earn $10, and I could mow the lawn in half an hour, I'm not going to hire you to mow my lawn. Now, that's an exaggerated example, but that's how it works. So there are different ways of setting prices. A socialist thinks that, well, we'll get a lot of smart people together in a room and computers and everything, and we'll be able to set the right price. It never works. What we have found is the best way to set prices is in a free market, or as free as we can devise. So there's no free market for the coronavirus. So we are seeing scarcity. We're seeing it already, the socialist approach in dealing with scarcity. Real Joe Cruz has his idea how it should be done. My idea is give it to the people who will have the greatest effect of prolonging life, whether it's their life or someone else's life. That would be the folks in the hospital, the doctors, the nurses, and folks like that, out to concentric rings like that. And when you got those people taken care of, then I suppose it makes some sense to go to the next vulnerable next, older folks and people with comorbidities. And the last people that should get it would be the healthiest ones, the ones at smallest risk to die. It's not how it works in a socialist culture. We've already seen it. No, you can't do it that way. You've got to do it on the basis of race. So you're not dealing with the scarcity in the socialist system. You're using the scarcity to promote some other objective. These folks here at the New England Journal of Medicine are saying This is a matter of equity and conscience. And that's why we have to give it to black people and brown people first. That's exactly the kind of mindset that drives socialism. The scarcity is not dealt with in economic terms, it's dealt with in social terms. Now, the fact that there isn't, the fact that we're not making enough so that we make a dent in the scarcity, that's not important. That's not the major objective in a socialist economy. And that's where we are with this vaccine. So it's going to be interesting to see the different approaches to how the vaccine should be handed out.
Does that apply to Guam?
The charge?
The minority status of who gets it first?
Well, I hope so.
That's what I'm saying, because the script is flipped.
Yeah. Yeah, when it comes to minorities, there aren't that many white folks here on the island. We are in the minority. There are more folks from the Federated States here now than there are folks, pale faces from the mainland. And it is a silly way to go about doing anything. And leave it to the Democrats to pick up on it. Okay, we're just about to head down the home stretch here. Why don't we do that, and then I'll come back to the courts versus Tom Pinehoff.
Rolling sound, quiet, and action.
The Ray Gibson Show, starring Senator Mona Silva Tyron as the news anchor.
I'm Mona Silva Tyron, and I'll have your local news every morning. Life moves pretty fast, so stay with us to stay informed right here on The Point.
Also starring Jerry Roberts as the Better Business Training Guru.
Get out there and do something good today, like listen to us, Monday through Friday, 6 to 10 a.m., where we go extra for you.
Produced by the real Joe Cruz. And your warm and intelligent host, Ray Gibson.
It's the Gibson Stream of Consciousness. All the players and all the games with cameos and calls from the most interesting people like you. We'll see and hear you right here on your talk radio superstation. This is The Point.
The Ray Gibson Show was filmed before a live Facebook audience.
Celebrate the season with Cold Stone Creamery's Cookie Cane Lane Ice Cream Cake with red velvet cake, dark chocolate peppermint ice cream, and Oreos, wrapped in fudge ganache and candy cane bits. Order in person, by phone, or at ordercoldstone.com. Cold Stone Creamery, the ultimate ice cream experience.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So here we are, home stretch, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. I got about 14 more minutes to the end of another perfect day here on Tall Tales. Taking a peek at Facebook and talking about how the vaccine should be distributed. I think Rob Hawk is onto something here. Rob Hawk says, I think it should be based on credit score. Now, of course, you got to specify a little bit. You mean the higher credit score gets it first? I think the Democrats would say, no, the lower credit score gets it first.
Those off the grid?
Yeah. Good comment, Rob. Okay, now we're down to the courts versus Thomas Pinehoff. And this is an article from an online service called law.com. Real people very seldom read these. It's primarily lawyers that read them. And this is what it says. Courts are finding constitutional challenges to Wuhan virus dining bans tough to swallow. And I didn't write that headline myself, Jose.
Still deserving.
Yeah. Federal constitutional arguments have been rejected by courts in Michigan, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere. Those state constitutional arguments could end up faring better. An ongoing federal lawsuit in Michigan launched by a restaurant trade association that is fighting to stop the latest Wuhan virus-based indoor dining ban appears to be emblematic of similar suits across the country. It shows the commonality of certain federal constitutional arguments being made by food services business, such as claims rooted in the United States Constitution's Equal Protection Clause, Commerce Clause, and due process rights. And it shows how high of a hurdle it is to convince federal courts in the midst of a deadly and raging pandemic to reverse dining bans handed down by governors, mayors, health officials, and Red Queens who cite scientific data as they impose farther-reaching restrictions aimed at stopping America's dramatic jumps in Wuhan virus deaths and illness. In Michigan, as in lawsuits examined in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere, the federal constitutional arguments don't appear to be holding sway. Generally, federal judges are rejecting attempts by restaurant and food service businesses to win restraining orders and injunctions on commonly employed indoor dining bans. And in the Maryland action, first launched in May by a range of businesses and by religious leaders, a federal judge finally dismissed the suit last month. The courts really, in second-guessing public health government actions such as dining bans, are, quote, replacing their own judgment for the government's judgment, said Stephen Schwinn. Stephen Schwinn, who rode to work on a bicycle. A University of Illinois Law School professor and editor of the Constitutional Law Prof blog. And most judges, he said, recognize that it is not their expertise or role. In other words, making judgments about diseases, contagion, and things like that.
Or the Constitution.
Well, and there you go. You can't really separate the two. At the same time, it does appear that certain state court arguments may have better chances of succeeding depending on the laws in a given state and the views held on emergency executive power by a state's high court. Now, of course, we don't have to worry about that because we don't have a constitution. We could have a constitution, but we don't. In Michigan, at least, the state Supreme Court ruled October 2nd that Governor Gretchen Whitmer violated her state constitutional authority by continuing to issue a host of Wuhan virus-targeted orders without asking for or obtaining the approval of legislators. Now, that can't be said about the Red Queen because she does have authority granted by the legislature, which they are absolutely against taking back. In Michigan, the court ruled in part that the 1945 Emergency Powers of the Governor Act, which appeared to allow Whitmer to impose restrictions and closures while avoiding lawmaker approval, was itself unconstitutional. You can't delegate that much power to a governor. By November, the Whitmer administration had switched tactics, instead having Robert Gordon, the state's Health and Human Services Director, issue an emergency order temporarily shutting down all indoor dining in the state. Gordon did so under a different state law. Michigan compiled laws, section 333.2253, which lays out the health director's emergency powers in the case of a public health epidemic. Gordon's November 15 order, which banned indoor dining and average beverage service, was promptly met with a November 17 complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief levied by the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association and its two co-plaintiffs, Heirloom Hospitality Group, a restaurant and hospitality company, and Suburban Inns, a lodging company. The suit, which is ongoing in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Michigan, brings forward mostly Constitution-based arguments. Those federal claims have not fared well, just as similar identical claims made in Maryland and Pennsylvania cases filed this year have not either. In separate opinions, Michigan District Court Judge Paul Maloney has rejected both an attempt at a temporary restraining order meant to halt Gordon's ban and a preliminary injunction effort that likewise would have allowed the state's restaurants to reopen indoor food and beverage service. In addressing the 14th Amendment equal protection arguments made by the Restaurant Association, Maloney wrote in part in a November 20 opinion denying a restraining order, quote, plaintiffs insist that the emergency order cannot rationally distinguish between indoor dining services, which are prohibited, and the retail and service establishments that remain open. Plaintiffs note that gyms remain open, Maloney continued. So do liquor stores, recreational marijuana dispensaries, tattoo parlors, and nail salons. But plaintiffs have not negated every conceivable basis for different treatment in the executive order, the judge wrote. Individuals who patronize the businesses that remain open can do so and must do so while wearing a face covering. Even those individuals exercising at a gym must wear a face covering. In contrast, individuals cannot eat or drink while wearing a mask.
You think so?
Yeah. So now there's an important legal point here that I've begun explaining in the last couple days. And the judge says plaintiffs have not negated every conceivable basis for the different treatment in the executive order. Now remember, I mentioned that if you're dealing with a fundamental right or a suspect classification like race or sex, then that disparate treatment will only pass constitutional muster if it furthers a compelling state interest in a manner that's least restrictive available. That's called strict scrutiny. But if you're not dealing with a fundamental right or a suspect classification, then you're down to rational state purpose. And what rational state purpose means is this: if anyone can imagine or hypothesize a rational state purpose in the discrimination, then it's constitutional, even if that was not the reason that the government officials engaged in the discrimination, and even if that's not the reason they're doing it now. It's an extremely low standard. So that's what the judge meant when he said plaintiffs have not negated every conceivable basis for the different treatment in the executive order. Yeah, that is the constitutional law on the point. Rational state purpose. So this classification, strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, or rational state purpose usually determines who wins and who loses. Now, when you're talking about the free exercise of religion, it's not completely a fundamental right, but it gets something close to strict scrutiny. So a church has a much better argument in dealing with these governmental restrictions than Tom Pinehoff's bar. Sad to tell you this, Tom. I would much rather be able to give you some good news and let you get back into business, because I think the way you guys are being treated is awful. But the way the Constitution is written, the fact that I think that the way the government is treating you is unsatisfactory isn't enough. It probably should be, but it isn't. On December 2nd, while knocking down the plaintiff's preliminary injunction motion, Maloney also wrote, to the extent that restaurants are treated differently from other food establishments, mall food courts and airports, for instance, the court notes that those food service establishments are much more transitional than a sit-down, dine-in restaurant. A group might not linger in an airport restaurant as long as it would linger in a normal restaurant, unless someone happens to propose to his husband in the airport. Going back to Pete Buttigieg, right? A group might not linger as you were because this plausible reason for the distinction still exists. Plaintiffs have failed to meet their burden on this claim. 3 attorneys at Honigman at a large Detroit-based law firm representing the plaintiffs in the case in which the state's motion to dismiss the suit and other filings are pending, did not return calls and emails seeking comment. The Michigan Attorney General's office, which is representing Gordon in the suit, said by email that it does not discuss our legal strategy and do not comment on pending litigation. Okay, I guess we've come to the end of the rainbow here for another day. Let's hear Ravel's Bolero, Jose.
Bolero? What is that?
The end of the show.
The end of the show.
Yeah.
This one.
$100 billion package provides hardworking taxpayers with only $600 each in relief payments. And not enough money is given to small businesses.
He says $2,000 is more in line with what most Americans actually need.
Fox's Jillian Turner, a deputy White House press secretary, calling the president's statement a call to action rather than a threat. Because Congress has to adjourn in fewer than 10 business days, the president could exercise what's known as a pocket veto, allowing the bill to expire without actually issuing a veto. 195,000 new coronavirus infections reported Tuesday. More public officials getting vaccinated.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott took the coronavirus vaccine Tuesday.
I will never ask any Texan to do something that I'm not willing to do myself.
Texas has seen a significant spike in the number of cases in recent weeks, but soon Abbott hopes more Texans will be inoculated.
By the end of this month, there will be more than 1 million vaccines distributed across the state of Texas.
Elected and other government officials are getting access to the vaccine, hoping to convince Americans to take it. HHS Secretary Alex Azar and Dr. Anthony Fauci got their shots Tuesday. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris is scheduled for next week.
Fox's Evan Brown reports the Surgeon General, Dr.